The morning I got called a discount war hero was the same day Linda brought me her victory scones, still warm, still undeserved. Name's Ray, 68, part-time mechanic, full-time ghost of the 2nd Fallujah. The badge they once mocked now sits behind glass. But what changed their minds? Ever seen respect arrive 12 boots at a time? Tell me what you'd have done. Before the first truck rolled in, Ray was already sweeping leaves off the gas station porch, just like every morning for the last 17 years. The broom rasped against the wooden planks, pushing aside brittle curls of aspen leaves crusted in frost. Ray adjusted the bill of his faded USMC cap, breath curling in the air. Across the lot, the sky blushed faintly above the Rockies, a line of pale orange behind jagged peaks. Inside, the AM radio buzzed to life with a familiar static burst before settling into a solemn voice. Today, we honor those who served. Ray didn't need the reminder. November 11th was never just a date to him. He swept methodically, boots scraping with each pass, the chill cutting through his flannel jacket. He preferred the silence between notes of the hymn playing faintly. My country. 'Tis of thee, letting the rhythm of the morning routine steady his breathing. 17 years since Craig handed him the keys and said, "Open her up how you like," and Ray hadn't missed a dawn since. A weathered pickup creaked into the gravel lot, tires crunching. Linda Carrington climbed down slowly, one hand gripping a pie tin wrapped in foil. Her gray curls peeked beneath a knitted cap, and she wore the same maroon coat she always brought out this time of year. "Always up before the rooster, huh?" she called, her voice soft and lined with warmth. Ray nodded, lips twitching. "Rooster's got nothing on me." Linda stepped carefully onto the porch. "This one's fresh, apple like usual." Crust turned out decent for once. He accepted it with both hands. "You spoil me, and you keep this place from falling apart." She gave him a quick glance. "You hearing the radio?" Ray inclined his head. "Been on since 5. Linda's smile dimmed just a little. "You gonna go this year?" He shook his head. "Nah. Never been one for crowds. Not anymore." She didn't push. She never did. After a quiet moment, she patted his arm, her gloved hand resting lightly. "Well, I'll see you Sunday, same pew." Ray watched her drive off, exhaust puffing into the cold. He balanced the pie on the counter inside and poured himself coffee from the rust-stained percolator, steam coiling up. The place smelled of oil, sugar, and dust, comforting in a way only time could make so. The front door clanged open 20 minutes later. Benji sauntered in, earbuds lodged, tight thumbs dancing over his phone. His jacket hung open despite the temperature, and his breath came in puffs as he muttered something that sounded like Wi-Fi's trash. Ray raised an eyebrow. "Morning." No response. Just a shrug as Benji leaned behind the counter, half lounging in the cracked vinyl chair. He tugged out one bud only to scoff when he caught sight of the badge pinned neatly to Ray's chest. That a souvenir or something? Ray didn't flinch. Something like that. Benji chuckled without mirth. "Cool. Didn't know they sold those at gift shops now." Ray turned away, walked over to the window, and began polishing it with a worn cloth. Outside, frost melted in slow streaks across the pane. His jaw worked as he focused on the motion. Circular firm again and again. Seriously, Benji went on, twirling a Sharpie like a drumstick. "Don't they hand those out at the mall for like $5? Wu paused. The cloth hung still for a moment. Then he walked back across the counter, reached over and switched off the radio with a quiet click. "You don't know what you're talking about." Benji looked up, blinking, caught off guard, not by the words, but the evenness in Ray's tone. Something in the man's gaze, calm but hard as rebar, held him for a breath before Benji muttered, all right. Just saying." Ray didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted the pie tin on the counter and sat down slowly on the stool behind the register. The silence stretched between them. Then, as the sun reached a little higher, slanting through the dusty blinds, Ray's eyes shifted to the photograph taped beside the till. Faded black and white. 3 young men in combat fatigues. The one on the right, slim, grinning arm slung around Ray's younger self, was circled in red ink just faintly. Ray didn't move. He simply looked. The hiss of a diesel engine broke the silence as a convoy of 3 military SUVs pulled into the lot. Ray didn't look up immediately. He was beneath the rear end of a pickup truck, socket wrench in hand, wrist deep in grease and half lost in thought. But the sound, the unmistakable purr of precision-tuned engines, and the uniform rhythm of military drivers reached him like a reflex, tugging at muscle memory. By the time he stood and wiped his hands on a rag, the first of the SUVs had parked parallel to the pump stations. Doors opened with syncopated clicks. 8 Marines stepped out, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed dust on their boots and wind in their uniforms. Their posture alone cut through the relaxed hum of the station like a salute through fog. Ray's gaze caught on one man stepping out of the front SUV. Square frame, close-cropped hair, the gait of someone who'd led more than just drills. He stretched his shoulders, rolled his neck once, then scanned the station with deliberate calm. His eyes briefly found Ray and paused. It wasn't long. A second, maybe 2. But in that moment, recognition flickered. Not the full blaze of "I know you," but a low burn that lit something older than names. Inside, Benji had his elbows on the counter, balancing a bottle of Mountain Dew between his palms. The bell above the door jingled as a woman in a Broncos hoodie walked in, juggling a toddler and a wad of scratch-off tickets. "Gas on 2, she called. "Gotcha," Benji replied, not looking up. Outside, Jesse Lynn's squad disbanded casually across the lot, some stretching, others filing into the minimart. Jesse stood still a moment longer, then turned and followed. Ray kept his eyes down and moved toward the air compressor. He didn't need to linger around introductions. Not today. Craig arrived shortly after flannel rolled at the sleeves, keys jangling at his belt loop. He gave Ray a curt nod and a mornin', then stepped inside. Benji was already snickering. His phone held low had a paused video on the screen, someone in camo shouting "Oorah" and falling into a kiddie pool. "Look at this guy," he muttered to no one. "Bet half these cosplay dudes just do it for TikTok clout." Craig's boots stopped hard on the tile. "Excuse me," Benji blinked, startled. Just saying. Some of them act like they're action stars." Craig stared at him. "That man out there," he jabbed a finger toward the pump bay, "has earned more than you'll ever know. You don't talk about folks like that while wearing a Crosswinds name tag." Benji's mouth opened, then closed. He muttered something unintelligible and retreated to the ice cooler. Meanwhile, Jesse lingered near the snacks, pretending to browse. His eyes drifted past the shelves, past the coffee machine to the old man behind the counter, now filling a receipt slip with careful script. The same man whose badge was polished to a quiet gleam pinned above his heart part, without flourish. As a mother and son exited, bag of chips in hand, thank yous exchanged, Jesse stepped up to the counter. "Were you with Bravo Company 2nd Battalion?" Fallujah Ray's hand froze mid-signature. His fingers twitched around the pen. The words came like a coded knock on a locked door long buried. He didn't look up immediately, just stared at the ink blot forming where the pen had stopped. Jesse waited. No impatience, just stillness. Finally, Ray looked up. His eyes, pale and steady, met Jesse's. There was a pause long enough to make the bell above the door seem loud when it chimed again. "I've been looking for you." "Sir, you saved my life," Jesse said, voice low but clear. 19 years ago. Second Fallujah. The words landed with the weight of gravel in a metal bucket, a wordsham unmistakable and impossible to ignore. Ray's hand hovered inches above the countertop pen, long set aside, muscles stiff beneath his flannel sleeve. The hum of the station lights above seemed to grow distant. Even the soft murmur of the radio, halfway through a Johnny Cash classic, faded into something background, like wind behind memory. The Marines who had entered the station a few minutes earlier continued browsing the shelves, chatting in low tones. But here by the counter, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Ray's eyes flicked to the photograph taped behind the register. Faded by sunlight and age, the black and white image showed 3 young men in fatigues desert behind them. One had been circled in red pen long ago. But it wasn't until now, under the harsh November light and Jesse's steady stare, that Ray recognized that face for what it was. Jesse barely shaving age dust on his cheek, eyes too wide for the helmet that threatened to swallow him. "I wasn't supposed to be there," Jesse continued. "They pulled me in last minute. I didn't know anyone in the platoon. But you pulled me out of that Humvee after the hit." Ray swallowed. His throat felt dry as if he'd walked through desert air. He shook his head slightly. "Could have been someone else." "No," Jesse said, firm. "It wasn't. You had that same damn grimace. That badge, you wore it on your chest plate." Across the room, Craig leaned quietly against the storeroom door, arms folded. He didn't interrupt. Benji, mop in hand, lingered by the drinks fridge, the mop head dry and untouched by water. No one spoke. "I spent years trying to find the name," Jesse went on. "The report was a mess. No photo. But I remembered your voice. The way you said, 'Don't you dare quit Marine.'" He laughed, almost ashamed. "I was 17, scared out of my mind." Ray pressed his palms to the counter. His knuckles were white. The station had never felt this still. Outside, life rolled on, cars passed, dogs barked, wind flapped a flag tied to the ice machine, but inside, time slowed. Ray didn't answer right away. His eyes found the clock above the register. Noon. Its ticking felt louder now. "You were barely out of high school," Ray finally said. His voice low, as if speaking into sand. "I didn't think you'd remember my name." "I did," Jesse said. "Not right away, but it came back. And when I saw you just now," his words caught. "I had to say something." Ray looked down at his hands. The grease beneath his fingernails, the age spots on the backs of his fingers, the scar running across his thumb, each told its own story. But none quite so loud as this one, spoken back to him now by a man who should have died under artillery fire in a foreign city 2 decades ago. "I don't talk about that day," Ray muttered. "You don't have to," Jesse replied. "But I've been waiting 19 years to say thank you." There was a pause, then Jesse reached out and laid a calloused hand on Ray's shoulder. "Give me 1 hour," he said. "Just stay here." Ray looked up from the oil rag just in time to see the first Marine step out and stand at attention. He blinked against the sun as the figure moved with deliberate calm. The polished black shoes gleamed against the oil-stained concrete. Dress blues immaculate. White gloves, a chest full of ribbons that caught the midday light like shattered glass. Ray froze. Another figure emerged behind the first, then a third. boots striking pavement, bodies falling into formation. 12 in total. No voices. No explanation. Just the unmistakable language of ceremony, unspoken and sacred. Inside the glass door, the faint ring of the entry bell went unnoticed. Craig, wiping his hands with a rag, stepped outside and immediately halted. His eyes darted between Ray and the assembling Marines. Without speaking, he made his way to the flagpole near Pump 4. With a slow, practiced grip, he lowered the station flag to half-mast. The old pulley creaked. The stars and stripes descended, folding into sunlight like a bow. Even the wind seemed to hush. Beyond the lot, Highway 285 buzzed quieter than usual. A state trooper idled his cruiser by the shoulder and stepped out. A UPS van pulled into the diner across the street and didn't unload. The waitress from Dot's Cafe leaned outside with a pot of coffee, one hand shading her eyes. And then, by twos, Jesse called. The first Marine broke formation. He was a wall of a man, tall, dark-skinned, with a scar tracing from temple to cheekbone like a faded thunderbolt. He stepped forward and stopped precisely 3 feet from Ray. A sharp salute, fingers crisp against his brow. "Thank you, Sergeant Major." No flourish, no fanfare, just truth. He stepped aside. The next man came, then another. "Thank you, Sergeant Major." And another. "Thank you, Sergeant Major." Their words were quiet, but in the thick silence each syllable fell like a drumbeat. Ray's shoulders stiffened, his lips parted, his hand rose halfway before falling again. He didn't know what to do with it, with any of it. By the 6th salute, Ray's breath caught. By the 8th, his hands were shaking. He wasn't cold. He wasn't old. He was overwhelmed. Their faces weren't boys anymore, but pieces of them still peeked through eyes he'd steadied under fire. Jaws clenched like they once were inside an armored convoy, waiting for the blast. Some he recognized, some he didn't, but all of them looked at him like he was more than a mechanic with a broom. The 11th Marine stepped forward, olive-skinned, a faint limp in his right leg. His salute was slower, more deliberate. "Thank you, Sergeant Major." Ray looked down for a moment, catching sight of his own scuffed boots, a smear of grease on his sleeve. The contrast burned. And then the last one approached. He was shorter, thin glasses, fogging slightly from breath. His wrist trembled as he lifted his hand. "Thank you, Sergeant Major," he said, voice cracking. Ray blinked hard. Behind the gathering, more people had arrived. Linda stood near the air compressor, hands clasped. No pie today, no apron. Just her wearing a lavender sweater, eyes rimmed red. She walked forward as the Marines stepped back into formation and reached out. Her palm pressed gently to Ray's shoulder. "You never told us," she whispered. Ray couldn't find his voice. He wanted to nod, to explain. But nothing came. The bell above the door jingled faintly. Benji stood frozen on the top step. No earbuds, no swagger. Just a 19-year-old, with his apron crooked, staring wide-eyed at something he didn't understand 5 hours ago. Inside, Craig moved behind the counter and turned the volume dial on the old tabletop radio. America the Beautiful drifted out. The notes warbled slightly too much dust in the speaker, but it didn't matter. The music curled into the air like incense. Then Jesse stepped forward again. In his arms, a rectangular shadow box wrapped in worn linen. He lowered himself slowly, deliberately to one knee and unfolded the cloth to reveal the polished wood and glass beneath. Inside, 12 challenge coins, each in its own velvet slot. At the center, a gleaming brass plaque engraved with care, Ray Murdoch, Sergeant Major, USMC, influenced generations. Never forgotten. Jesse's voice when it came was reverent. These coins are from 12 units that carried your training forward. Men who lived because of your voice, your grit, your grace under fire. He offered the box upward. Ray's hands hesitated before touching it, calloused fingers tracing the edge of the frame as if unsure it were real. His breath hitched. The sun caught a single tear as it broke and ran down his cheek, glinting like oil on water. And from behind, near the steps, a whisper. I didn't know. I'm sorry. Benji's voice cracked like dry kindling. Ray didn't turn. He was still staring at the coins, eyes misting, lips parted slightly, as if letting go of something that had clung for decades. By 3 p.m., the story had already made it to the local newspaper's Facebook page and was gaining steam. Inside Crosswinds, the coffee machine gurgled a steady rhythm, filling the station, with the warm scent of roasted beans and something faintly floral from Linda's potpourri jar. The bell above the door jingled softly as more people came and went than usual for a late afternoon. Some bought gas. Most just walked in, gave Ray a nod, or in some cases reached across the counter with a firm shake of the hand and a quiet, "Thank you." Ray barely looked up each time. He wasn't used to this kind of attention and certainly didn't seek it. But he also didn't wave it off anymore. The gesture from the Marines had cracked something in him, something long buried under years of routines, oil-stained gloves, and muffled memories. He nodded back, sometimes managed a faint smile, but mostly went on with his duties. The little boy came in around 3:30. He had a shock of red hair under a knit beanie, freckles spattered across his cheeks like raindrops. He held something behind his back. Ray was restocking oil filters when he heard the soft voice. "Excuse me, Mr. Soldier." Ray turned, wiping his hands on a rag. "That's me," he said, unsure what else to offer. The boy held out a crumpled piece of paper, construction paper, orange and blue, scribbles a crooked flag in the corner. In big, shaky letters, it read, "Thank you, Mr. Soldier." Ray crouched down, slowly, creaky knees protesting. He took the drawing like it was a folded flag, unfolding it with reverent hands. "That's real nice, kid," he said, voice rougher than he meant. "Real nice." The boy beamed, then darted out to a waiting mother holding the car door open. Benji had been silent most of the afternoon. He'd been tidying shelves that didn't need it, sweeping spots that were already clean. When the crowd slowed, he quietly stepped behind the counter, lifted the old photo of Ray and his squad, the one with the red circled face, and gently replaced it with a new printout. The shot was from just hours ago, Ray standing flanked by 12 uniformed Marines, the shadow box in his hands, the flag rippling gently behind him. Ray noticed and paused. "Craig said it was okay," Benji muttered. "I thought maybe you'd want people to see it." Ray didn't speak, but he didn't stop him either. At one point, a pastor came in with a thermos and left it on the counter. "For the man who's kept us all running," he said. "Not just our engines." A school teacher followed soon after, setting down a small card signed by her third-grade class. "They learned about Veterans Day today," she said, "and about humility." Craig made a rare appearance around sunset, hands dusted with grease, his voice scratchier than usual. "You know," he said, tapping the counter with 2 fingers, "thinking of naming Pump 3 after you. Murdoch #1. Has a ring to it, don't it?" Ray rolled his eyes, but the chuckle that followed was real. "Might scare off customers." Craig shrugged. "Nah, make 'em feel safer." As the day wound down, Ray stepped outside. The air had grown cooler, but it wasn't biting, just crisp. The sun was tucking itself behind the hills west of Elm Ridge, casting everything in golden stripes and long, quiet shadows. The flags on the lampposts swayed in the breeze, their motion gentle and dignified. He finished wiping down the last pump, his fingers slower than usual, lingering. He looked toward the lot where Jesse's convoy had stood earlier. It was empty now, save for the breeze and tire tracks pressed into gravel. Back inside, Benji locked the register. "Hey," he said, not quite meeting Ray's eyes. Earlier this week, what I said about the badge. I didn't know, I'm sorry." Ray just looked at him for a long beat, then gave a short nod. "Next time, ask before assuming." Benji nodded back, almost grateful to be corrected. The station closed at 7. Ray moved through the steps, like always, shutters down, lights dimmed, floors swept. But the day hadn't been ordinary, and the air still felt different, warmer despite the falling temperature. He stepped out to lock the side door and noticed something unusual near the flagpole. A shadow had moved, he was sure of it, but the lot was empty. No headlights, no footsteps. As he approached, he spotted it, a small white envelope tucked just beneath the pole, taped to the base with care. He knelt, peeled it off, and opened it right there under the rising moon. Inside was a note, handwritten. Unfolded once it read, "You saved me then. You saved more than you'll ever know. Jesse." Ray held the paper for a long time, then slowly reached into the back pocket of his wallet and slid it in right next to a creased black and white wedding photo, edges frayed from time. He stood beneath the flag a moment longer, his figure silhouetted in the glow of the pole's single bulb, the envelope tucked safe where memories lived. At sunrise, Ray did something he hadn't done in decades. He stood at the flagpole and saluted. The air was sharp, the kind that crept under jackets and curled around collars, but Ray didn't flinch. His right hand rose in a slow, deliberate motion, palm angled just so, his eyes fixed on the flag that rustled above him. It was the same flag Craig had lowered to half-mast the day before now, climbing slowly back to its place beneath the pale blush of morning light. Frost dusted the edges of the pumps and windshield glass shimmered silver blue, but the breeze held a kind of softness. A new day had arrived. Inside the shop, Benji was already at the coffee machine, remarkably on time. He fumbled with the old filter, then caught sight of Ray through the window, rigid, dignified, facing the pole. He didn't say a word, just watched. Ray returned inside with quiet steps, his hands warmer somehow. The store felt different today, same faded posters and vinyl chairs, but infused with something gentler. Craig was thumbing through a notepad behind the counter, sketching a rough idea with bold block letters, "Wall of Quiet Valor." He looked up as Ray walked in. Thinking of putting something permanent by the register, Craig said, tapping the pad. "You know, a little tribute spot. Maybe a shadow box, couple of coins, that badge?" Ray's eyes shifted to the newly installed case on the wall where the Marine plaque now rested. The same plastic badge Benji once dismissed was mounted beneath it, glinting under soft morning fluorescence. The young man had done it himself, frame and all. Benji glanced up from the coffee pot, voice lower than usual, black with just a hint of cinnamon. "That's how you take it, right?" Ray paused. "Haven't had anyone make my coffee in years." Benji grinned, sheepish. "Figured it was time you got served." Ray took the cup, nodded. The moment hung between them, quiet but full. The door chimed as Linda stepped in, balancing a bakery box against her hip. "Victory scones," she announced, lifting the lid to reveal flaky pastries dusted with sugar and lined with cherry jam. "For the whole team, especially you, Mr. Hero." "I'm no hero," Ray muttered, but he smiled when she pressed a napkin-wrapped scone into his palm anyway. Well, you're our hero, she said and leaned close. Craig told me about the coins, about the boy from Fallujah. You never said anything. Ray shrugged, but there was no tension in his shoulders anymore. Later that morning, as the town stirred, a few regulars filtered in. They pointed toward the flag outside, murmured among themselves, lingered a little longer than usual. Craig made a show of pulling a folding chair from the back room and placing it near the window. We ought to build a bench out there, he said, nodding toward the pole. Something sturdy. Wood, maybe oak. Plaque could read, "For the ones who came home and the ones who never left." Ray's gaze drifted out the window again. The frost had melted sunlight, casting crisp angles across the lot. He stepped into the back room for a moment, pulled the envelope from his wallet. It was a little wrinkled now from the night before, but the words inside still rang clear. You saved me then. You saved more than you'll ever know, Jesse. He reached for a pen from the workbench drawer, stared at the blank back of the note. Then with steady fingers he wrote, To those I served with, thank you for remembering. He folded it again, tucked it back next to the wedding photo, and stood quietly in the hush of his own shop. The bell above the door jingled again. Ray looked up. A young woman in uniform had entered army fatigues, blonde hair, pulled into a tight bun, eyes sharp but kind. She paused just inside, scanned the shop, then walked toward him with purpose. As she reached the counter, she set her hand on the register and spoke, her voice soft. My father told me about you. Ray stared at her for a long moment. He didn't ask who her father was. He didn't need to. Outside, the flag rippled once more in the breeze, sunlight catching the red, white, and blue in quiet waves. In a quiet town where most folks just pass through, a man once overlooked stood still long enough for the world to finally see him. No grand speeches, no medals pinned, just a hand raised in silence, and the kind of respect that can only be earned by living with quiet courage. Kindness, after all, doesn't wear a uniform or demand recognition. It simply shows up again and again, even when no one is looking. Sometimes the strongest souls are the ones who never asked to be known. So if this story warmed your heart, maybe take a moment today to notice the quiet ones around you. After all, even a plastic badge can carry the weight of a lifetime.